Thank you. And hello again, good afternoon. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to do this kind of interview with my dear guest. And I was lucky to be 2 years ago in 2018 in Valletta, in Malta, when Valletta was European Capital of Culture. And in that year, the NEMO, organization that all of you probably know, that is network of European organization, organized a big conference in the new open museum, MUZA. And on that conference, I actually saw this way of presentation, and I stole it from Gabriela. And that is actually the way of having open discussion or open interview for public. And I thought that it would be great to share with you this great experience with Mr. Debono and the great job that he done in his museum, where he used to be a director. And because for me that was a really great experience, not only the museum, but the story which was behind the museum. And I think that it's always nice to share these stories. So I invite Mr. Debono to share his story about MUZA Museum today with us. Jelena told you something about Mr. Debono, and you probably read it in the, this book that we prepared for the conference. So I will start with question immediately, because we have a lot of questions and also we have a lot of things that we can talk today. So first of all, MUZA is not just a regular museum project. What is MUZA exactly?
Well, I'd like to start by thanking you for this invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you here for this conference. To answer your question with a straight answer would be, MUZA is a vision. Because it all starts from an idea, a dream, which was born in response to a situation. A situation which I can describe as concerning a traditional museum, an art museum, a national museum of fine arts, which had become obsolete. People were not visiting, people were not interested in this museum, people weren't even aware that it existed. I remember my first weeks at the then National Museum of Fine Arts. We had invited a class, school children to visit, and I remember seeing them coming down the street, and instead of turning around, turning the corner to come to the museum, they turned the other way, because they thought that the museum is somewhere else. And they were mixing two different museums, or a cultural center at that time. So that was the part of the project. And that situation made me and my team, and the people who worked with me, start to ask difficult questions. And one of the difficult questions that we asked was, do we really need a museum? Because for all I know, we don't need one. None of my team back then said we don't need one. And I wasn't expecting something else. But then, what type of museum do we need? What is the 21st century art museum institution that our communities need? And that is where this project was born. MUZA itself stands for 3 values, which are the guiding values of the project. First of all, it is an acronym, meaning that it stands for Museu. I'm using Maltese here, sorry, but I mean, Maltese sounds a little bit Semitic. Well, it is a Semitic language, Arabic, but it's a European language. So it's Museu Nazionale dell'Arte. It's National Museum of Fine Art. So it's Museu Nazionale dell'Arte, MUZA. It's an acronym. And that's the first value, which acknowledges a past. We're not starting from scratch. We didn't remove the collections, just forgot all about the historic collection that was born in the late 1920s and had a very interesting growth. It has its DNA, it has its gel that holds it together. We were acknowledging a past. We had to acknowledge a past. Then MUZA is a reference to the muses, no? Which are about creativity, and this second value is all about etymology. Those of you who have studied languages know that a word has its roots. You can actually trace from where that word originates. And very much like understanding the roots or the etymological roots of the word museum, we try to understand what are the roots of the institution, what is really essential. And I think one of the answers was relevance. The third value is local. MUZA with a Z, with a dot. That is Maltese. And the word is used in our everyday parlance. If we meet someone who is singing in the street, we say, oh, you're inspired today, you've got the MUZA. So something, an institution which is up there, irrelevant to the common people, to the man in the street, or known to a few, suddenly, even the name is part of our everyday, of the way we actually communicate. I've got some other visuals. This is the point of departure. This is the old museum, from where it all began. A very traditional type of display. A historic collection which is mostly focused, the strength of the collection is mostly Baroque, Italian Baroque. And there's a very particular reason for that, because Malta was a British colony, and Italian culture was considered as an anti-colonial statement, so they were collecting 17th century art to make a statement. So there's a very particular narrative there. Well, it's a small picture, I'm very sorry, but this is the site that actually hosts MUZA. And I think there's another image after this. Yes, this is the courtyard. This is the courtyard of the museum. As you can see, it's a historic building. And Malta, in our case, we don't have purposely built museums. Most of our, practically all our museums are historic sites. So, and this was the place where the original Valletta Museum was established. So in fact, the project originally was known as back home. We're going back to the place where the collection was born in a way. And obviously, the challenge here was to work with a historic building, which has its stories, which has its voice. It speaks history, it's layered, it's not just one layer, but there are very many layers. And we have to be very careful how to handle these layers. We weren't there to literally choose which layer to expose, but we were there to expose all layers and get the layers to speak, and then let the public choose which voice to converse with in terms of history, because this was a 16th century palace, remodeled 3 times, then the British transformed it, then it was changed for other reasons, so even the building itself was a challenge. But what was very important at the end of the day is what these 2 slides explain. It had to be less patchwork and more weave. And I'll explain what this means. Sometimes we look at museums as being a patchwork of things. We have the collection, we have the restaurant, sometimes we have a tourist information center, in other circumstances we would have the museum shop, and we would tend to look at the museum as being the gallery, first and foremost, and the rest would be the collaterals, sort of the contours. For this vision, that would have come across as a patchwork. Bits and pieces brought together to make one whole. We wanted a weave. I remember these two slides being the first two images that I showed my team when we began to work on the content, on what would be displayed. So the idea was, and I will be showing you examples, of how the restaurant can become an interpretation tool, of how the gallery can empower narratives, of how the museum shop can be an extension of the museum experience. The ambition was to create one experience, because at the end of the day, people go into a museum and they don't, most of them don't choose, they experience the whole thing, they get the sense of the whole experience, not just bits and pieces. So the ambition was to create less patchwork and one weave, and more weave.
Thank you. So during this preparation for opening of the new MUZA museum, you create new museum model, which you call inclusive and polyphonic. Can you please explain us what does it mean?
Yes. In this case, I believe it's best that we go by the images here. The challenge was to present a historic collection, unknown, unacknowledged, forgotten, in ways and means that communities can engage with. So transforming a traditional collection into a resource. And the main project through which we engaged with this reading was called, and what is again, sorry, MUZA, Sharing MUZA. It's a very simple project, and in a way you could actually compare to some of the things that my colleagues have been presenting here this morning and this afternoon. So the main advantage for MUZA, for this project, was that we were dealing with a small community. Malta is a 350,000 has a 350,000 population, so it's easy to engage with small communities. And the idea was to go capillary. So we would approach a particular community, say Valletta, the capital city, would work with the local council, and we would invite a cross-section of the population that is representative of the identities of that particular community. So we'll have as much a comprehensive take on that community as possible. We would invite them to the museum, to the old museum, and we would help them choose, help them underline. We wouldn't tell them what to choose, what is relevant for us, but what dating makes sense for them. And we would be there to help them choose. Then we would invite them to speak about their choice, keeping in mind that these had never been to the museum. So suddenly they are researching their choice and speaking about it. And at the end of the presentation, we would actually ask them to tell us where they would like an image of their choice to be displayed in their community. So we start off from a situation where there is no relationship between the community and the artwork, ending with a situation where there is a strong sense of ownership of an artwork that is a personal choice, that is shared with peers and with the person's community. And in fact, this is the discussion that will be happening. This is one of the very first groups that we convened, and there is a video of one of the participants. It's in Maltese, but the subtitles are in English. She is a hairdresser. A hairdresser coming to the museum to choose a work of art.
borda, għandi 30 sena, hairdresser, għandi ħanut ġewwa l-Gżira, illi miftuħa għal dawn l-aħħar 9 snin, u l-maġġoranza tal-klijenti tiegħi huma Gżirjani. Naqsam il-MUZA tagħni l-opportunità li niltaqa' ma' Gżirjani li ma kontx naf qabel u kif ukoll ma' pittura li llum medha tant tal-qalbi. Jiena żilt pittura mis-seklu 18 li turi s-Sagra Familja u mal-ewwel fakritni fl-għaqda tal-familja. Xtaqt naqsam din l-għażla mal-komunità Gżirjana billi il-kopja tal-pittura tiġi waħda mat-sontir tal-Knisja u bekk kulħadd ikun jista' jgawdiha.
So someone who had never been to the museum came, we had her choose, and she shared her choice with her community. And some other pictures for you. My apologies, small, but this shows our technicians hanging the posters in the street. That looks a little bit better, thank you. And next. Next, please. I can tell you a story about this image. By the way, these images were not staged, so they were taken on the spot. And that's one of the first posters that we actually put up in the street, and the old lady lived close by, and she was very angry to see my stuff hanging this poster at the corner. And she came and she told us, well, we have to remove it, I don't want this rubbish here, and so on and so forth. But we convinced her that we're very busy, they would be returning. And as soon as they were leaving, they just turned around the corner, one of them stopped, and he saw her come out of her home again, and she stood there looking at what that poster had to say. And in a way, it was very telling about this project, was at first that, what are you doing? Why are you putting these posters? But then the reaction was, I mean, this is ours, this belongs to us. There were instances when we went back after 3 months, 6 months to remove the posters, and the people in the street told us, no, you're going to leave it here, that's ours, you don't take it away. So, in a way, it's very telling about how we can actually make collections relevant in the now. You know, making them relevant not because the curator says so, but it's because the community believes. And the curator is there just to facilitate, to make these conversations happen. I think there's another one. Yes? It's another picture. Someone who is taking his dog around, and he stops to see a poster which was put up, and it speaks about a choice of his colleague, his friend, which he is sharing with him as well, with his community. I believe there might be another one. This is perhaps one of the most sensitive, I would say, or emotive story. Because what was really happening is that an artwork, an unknown artwork, 3 months before, was being chosen by different people who, more often than not, didn't know that they were choosing the same picture. And in this case, a refugee living in Malta had chosen a picture which a resident in Valletta had chosen. Now, you probably know that in Malta there is a challenge with refugees, and there is the challenge to create a working relationship and to create the right environment for different identities to live together. And this artwork is a case of the choice, this project, and the choice of this artwork is a good example, in my opinion, of how an artwork can actually create a bond between two people with completely different identities who don't know each other, but they are acknowledging the same artwork as something of relevance to them. And I think this could be a conversation that we can have even for other realities, for other contexts as well.
Thank you. And you usually use term curating communities. What does that mean for you?
I think that the 21st century curator still has, but this is the display, we will be discussing this, I think it's the next question, but yes, we can keep this as a background. I think that the 21st century curator has a challenge, which is, in a way, is there for the taking. It's a beautiful challenge. Because traditionally, curators have been understood as curating collections, making sure the collection is studied, well presented, researched, well conserved, so on and so forth. We know it. It's the job of a curator. But then, what about interactions? What about meanings? What about extracting and promoting and empowering significance for that? And this is where I think the main shift will be happening in museums. Museums understood as public spaces, where the overarching need is to create, to empower relations between artworks and publics. And the curator could actually curate that, could actually empower that, empower this relationship, this dialectic between an artwork and a public. And obviously it's about making collections relevant, it's about curating stories. Stories that one can extract from a collection, that a collection can inspire, and that publics can actually create, foster, develop, and which can literally give meaning in the now. Consider that something which is 200 years old is relevant not just historically, but also in the now and in the foreseeable future.
Yes, and I think that for this photo is the right question, that you have special design and special labels in this new permanent exhibition, and that is something that makes this museum really different.
I've chosen a few images to comment the way we wanted to make a collection relevant to local publics, to museum publics. And there was a lot of thought in that, and in many cases, empathy was a key phrase. I think someone mentioned it this morning, the idea of empathizing with your public, trying to understand what your public wants. I can share an interesting story here, which was told to me by a colleague. A dear colleague of mine, she's retired now. She used to work at the Victorian Albert Museum. She was on the team of the British Galleries. Those of you who have been to the Victorian Albert Museum probably know about these galleries. Her name is Sarah Medlin. She was on the team, and one of the first things that she did, I mean, when they began to work on the British galleries way back in the late 90s, she actually convened a team of experts, art historians, connoisseurs, top people who know the subject very well. And she invited them over to the museum for the first meeting, and the first thing that she told them, thank you for being here, now we will go to the Natural History Museum. And these experts just went, what? Aren't we working on the British galleries? Isn't it about history, about art, about applied art, anything else you mentioned, but it's art, more often than not. And the reason why she actually told them that they will be going to the Natural History Museum is because she wanted them to wear the shoes of their future publics. She didn't want them just to communicate, to script questions, to write, display narratives just based on their expertise, but she wanted them to feel the way someone who is on the other side, in front of the object, in front of the showcase, in front of the artwork, would feel by literally going by empathy. She actually took them to the Natural History Museum where no one was an expert, and she made them feel the way a non-expert would feel when he's in front of an artwork. And this I did it with my team, and it was a very rewarding experience. And the results are some of the images I'm commenting here. So this is the first gallery as soon as you enter. The concept is not unique. I mean, the idea of the glass easels, the paintings hanging on glass easels, something which Lou France, I believe, has experimented with, and it originates from South America. It's a concept by Italian architect Lina Bobardi, who invented the radical glass easel. As a display concept, it's interesting, it's unique. It's back at the museum of Sao Paulo because it was in a way removed at some point in time, but it's back. It's iconic in South America. But the idea of the radical glass easel is that something which is traditionally hanging on the wall suddenly is hanging in your space. It's closer to you. And it exposes the work of art, warts and all, because you could actually see the back if you would like to. So the idea of creating a crowd of people waiting for you at the entrance of the gallery speaks about the idea that you are visiting an art gallery to engage with publics in a way. So the first thing that would welcomes you at MUZA is a crowd of people, which you might have witnessed in the streets as you would be coming to the gallery, which you would meet in the courtyard. We have seen an image of that, and which you would suddenly then become portraits. That's the Lina Bobardi concept, which is quite iconic in South America. And this is the type of engagement that actually happened. In the display, in the entrance, we actually featured a broad selection of works of art, including photography. And I remember her walking in, telling her, listen, we have a portrait of a refugee in our permanent display. Would you like to see it? She told me, yes, she's a refugee as well. She's on the Malta African Media Council. And as soon as she saw this photo, she actually recognized him, she knew his story, and she took this selfie to send it to him. And I believe this image and this episode very much represents what we are about as a museum sector. This is what really, in my humble opinion, counts. I mean, this is what really makes me happy when I see these things, that we are relevant, that someone actually could engage with an artwork that could actually extract a personal story, which he knew about. And in this case, she hadn't seen him for ages. She was actually on a boat with him, traveling from Libya to Malta, and had lost track of him. And then she got to know later that he was in Italy, and so on and so forth. So it's all about human stories. It's all about human stories. I don't know, yes, there are others. Yes, unfortunately, this is also a small picture, but it shows another part of the display. How can you explain a style to a non-expert? This is a million-dollar question. You would need a book. And many people don't have the time to read books as well. And in this case, this was a local sculptor who lived in Rome and who was very much into futurism, speed, movement, and so on and so forth. How do you explain the style, his style, to a non-expert audience? In this case, the solution we proposed was very simple. If we had to put together a selection of works that speak of his style, you can actually communicate it effectively. And in this case, there's a second image, we actually created a hybrid between a display and an installation where we created a sort of a stampede of moving objects. Most of them were images, sculptures of horses, and a very dynamic selection of works. And if you stand right in front of it, you will see this whole group coming towards you. You can actually feel that. I cannot not mention that some of these ideas struck our public by surprise. They were not expecting these type of dialogues. And I remember with the Glazizes, someone wrote in the local press and say, why are these paintings hanging on Glazizes? Paintings are made to hang on the wall. And my answer was, I mean, I didn't answer the letter of communication, but my natural response was, really? Is there a rule that paintings should hang on the wall? Is there a rule? Yes or no? I mean, my question is a challenge. I think that starting from a point where anything can be questioned can literally lead us to innovation, to new ideas, and keeping our publics in mind, we can actually make inroads by creating a language, a display language that people can understand and can relate to. I think there's one last slide here. Yes, this is one of my favorites, and it explains how we can democratize art. The setting is inspired by a traditional academic drawing class. You have the model, and you have artists or students drawing the cast that is presented in front of them. Obviously, our publics are not, I mean, a good portion, a very good portion, almost the majority of our publics are not experts. They are not there they haven't come to do an art class. So in that case, technology could actually help them bridge the gap. We actually took note of the syllabus and of the lesson plan, and we actually translated that into an interactive experience. But they are asked to do that with an original 19th century artwork displayed next to the easel. So they are actually drawing during their visit next to a historic artwork. It's as if the artist was still there and he had just left to have a coffee. So they are both of the same class. The artist who lived 120 years ago and their presence there during their visit. As you can see, there is a common trend, the idea of humanizing, the idea of putting the human at the center of the museum experience. How can someone who has never attended an art class understand what it takes to draw something from life, a cast? I'm taking long to answer your questions, but...
Okay. But also you believe that the museum institution can promote social cohesion and foster a community of identities, different identities through the art. How do you think that it is possible?
It is a challenge, a big challenge. And I think we've already discussed this possibility with the sharing MUZA project. Now, when we had the refugee choosing an artwork which someone from Valletta had also chosen. I dream of a museum institution that goes beyond presenting the history of a territory. I dream of an institution where different identities can be represented in one collection. We still have museums that speak about East Asian art, European art, even galleries. But what about identities? The Museum of Identities, where different identities can be presented in one space. And I don't think it's a long shot. I remember a very interesting exhibition held in London way back in 2015, which was called Bronze. And in this exhibition, the common denominator, the subject was bronze, anything which is bronze. But what was interesting is that they actually could display sculptures from Africa, 16th century sculptures, next to a Donatello. And the way that is the challenge. I mean, I'm not saying that the traditional museum is dead, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we need to start from considering relevance as the key value of a museum. And I think that museums can be a tool also for social cohesion in this sense, where different identities can find themselves, can find common ground in the choice, and they can actually compare their identity through the artwork with the other, who is also represented there.
Yes, and that will for sure make a better society, and the world will be a better place for living, and museum will have a big part in that. But you have one very interesting comparison. You say that the museum director is like a conductor. I like that very much because sometimes I see myself in my everyday job as a conductor. So what was the idea of that?
I'm surprised that you'll be reading some of the things I've written. And I'm humbled. I'll share from where you've taken this quotation in a few minutes, because I know that you have another question. Yes, I mean, there are so many things that a museum director has to consider. The traditional museum director will consider just the safeguard of his collection, and make sure that that collection is safe, well studied, well researched, well presented. We all know that. But then there is so much that a museum director can aspire to achieve. And in a way, I see him very much in terms of a conductor. No? I'm not a conductor, I've never conducted orchestras. Occasionally I go to concerts, so I know what's happening right in front of me. But in a way, an orchestra is made of many elements, no? You have the brass, you have the violins, you have the wind instruments, different types of instruments, different types of identities, different types of sounds, which is very much similar to our communities. A museum, there's so much happening in a museum. There are so many elements in a museum. And it is the duty, it is the job, it is the challenge of the director to make them work together as an orchestra. Because at the end of the day, the museum which is of relevance, which is most relevant, is the one that has a clear sound, a clear vision, and a clear objective. And you cannot achieve a clear sound if you don't engage with all the elements in your orchestra. If the wind instruments decide to play on their own, you cannot have a clear sound. And if the rest of the instruments then take note, and if everyone plays on his own, you get what you get, a cacophony. But if all the elements come together, and there is one voice, and different publics are engaging with the collection, the cafe is in sync with the permanent display, the services offered, the products available at the shop are in sync with the collection, they are an extension of the collection, different publics are engaging with your collections, then you have a clear voice, you have a clear image, and the best type of PR that you could ever have, you'll be teaching me here, is word of mouth. If someone goes out of the gallery and says, wow, that's a place I've never been to, I actually had fun. I had fun visiting a museum. I enjoyed it. I go back because it's fun. Yeah, museum can be fun. Can be fun.
And I'm the best PR of your museum because I bring you here to tell the story about it to all our public and all my colleagues in Serbia because I was feeling fun when I entered your museum. But what I would like to ask you now is, you used to be a museum director, now you are a professor in the university, you are also advisor of the President of Malta, but you are also running one blog, and the title of that blog is The Humanist Museum. So how do you see the importance of social media and new kind of PR for the museum and the museum development?
Yes, that's from where the director got the quote, from my blog, The Humanist Museum. I think it is crucial. I mean, I began to write my blog in March last year, and I share regular posts. I had to take a break at the end of last year, but I get a lot of response because at the end of the day I'm sharing ideas, I'm sharing experiences. I've been working in this sector for 25 years. I'm now involved in many other things. I'm on the advisory board of We Are Museums. I work with Nemo as well. They are very, very good friends of mine. And many other things, so it's very important to share ideas. And this brings me also to young audiences. In fact, I wanted to explain this idea by asking you, how many of you are on Facebook? Practically everyone. How many of you know of TikTok? Much less. If you want to speak to a young audience, you have to forget about Facebook and think of TikTok. Because that is where everybody's going. So you might have the best Facebook page around, but the audience is not there. The audience is not there. And in a way, even a blog corresponds to a very particular type of audience. And in fact, I'm always happy to receive invites to speak about museum visions and ideas and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, it's the human interaction which counts. I mean, social media is very important, absolutely. It's very important, and you can do a lot with it, a lot as a museum, and not just by communicating ideas, not just by announcing events. There are whole strategies, courses for museums to engage with local audiences. I think MUZA had a course actually, and it was fully booked as well, how to engage with your audiences, training courses, online training courses. But we should never lose sight of the human touch at the end of the day. And this is something which I used to practice as a museum director. I would try to make it a point that at least once a week I do a tour of the museum with my audience, with my publics. I don't leave it to the gallery assistants to take people around, but I do it myself. Because I would always want to smell the museum, to feel the museum, to hear the museum, because it speaks as well. And that helped me not lose touch with the reality of what is happening. Because there's never something which is fixed. Everything is in movement, and even a museum can change.
Thank you. It was inspiring too, but since Novi Sad will be the European Capital of Culture in 2021, and Valletta was in 2019, can you please tell us how do you see the role of the museum in the European Capital of Culture?
The European Capital of Culture is very much focused on public participation. It's something which we experienced in Valletta, how many people we're going to reach out to, how many people we're going to engage, how many citizen participatory projects will be happening. And the museum is an ideal place. It's a public space. It's a place where people can come together. It's a place which can inspire. So, in a way, the legacy of the Capital of Culture can be enriched thanks to the museum. Obviously, it's all about creating the right space, the right environment for people to engage. And I know you are doing it, and you are doing an amazing job from what you've told me, from what I've heard as well. But it's all about relevance. It's the first word that I mentioned. I mean, how relevant are we? How are we going to become relevant if we're not, or more relevant if we aren't? Once I remember a statement by the director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He actually said that he believes in the ideal of museum publics to move from visitors to participants to inhabitants. You inhabit the museum. It doesn't mean you sleep there. Well, there are projects where where people are invited to sleep in the museum, but the idea of home, that it feels like home. You inhabit a museum, which is something that others have commented about. Orang Pamuk, Museum of Innocence, the Manifesto for Museums, Modest Manifesto for Museums. The future of the museum is the home, a homely space.
I suppose that is the answer for my next question, that is, how do you see the art museum of the future?
I dream of a museum which is a beautiful place, always. And the art museum of the future can be, and I'm convinced that it will be going there, can be much more inclusive, much more polyphonic. Now, there are a number of tools, a number of initiatives that will inform all this. One of them is, for example, blockchain technology. Do you know what blockchain is?
No. I try to understand,
okay.
but I never met it.
Yes.
So please.
Yes. If I can, I'm not the best person to explain what blockchain is, but I'll do my best. Blockchain is a system whereby trust in the system is gained through open participation. So, let's say this is something, for example, that the Tetrakov has been experimenting with. You actually decide to promote the conservation of an artwork. I'm giving a very simple example. And you go on blockchain, you create the file. It's a software, it's a technology whereby you get participants to engage with that project, and they will be financing it. And you can get participants that can donate 100 dinar, but you could also get participants who would donate 20,000 dinar. But each of them has a share in that project, and each of them knows what the others are doing. So the safety, the value of the project is in its openness, that people are working together on the software to promote something. Now imagine a financial model for a museum that can actually bring together so many stakeholders, all of them know each other and all of them know their contribution, and this knowledge makes the system safe, because you cannot have flaws in the system because everyone will know that there's something wrong. I'm being simplistic, Margarita, but it's there. I mean, this can create a very democratic museum, which means that an acquisition, a work of art, will be acquired by much more consensus, by having people acknowledge that yes, we should purchase this artwork, we should promote this project. I mean, social media has also brought the world even closer together. So there is much more openness in the sense that research, knowledge is much more accessible. I mean, we have journals that are open access now, so we don't need to wait for a research which is exclusive to an art gallery, and that art gallery will be investing on that particular artist because they have privileged knowledge. So a wider access to knowledge makes collections much more transparent, much more inclusive. I mean, all these are going to influence what the art museum of the future will be. But I mean, again, it boils down to one word: relevance. Societies will continue to evolve, communities will continue to evolve. The way we think today is not necessarily what people in 2000 will be thinking, and what the values would be. And I think that has to be taken into account, that things evolve, and that the more inclusive, the more participatory the art museum becomes, the more it will stay relevant.
We will try to think in this way when we start to prepare our new permanent exhibition in 2022. But for the end of this interview, please announce what will happen in Malta in November this year, and so that we can invite our colleagues to come and to be a part of one great happening.
Yes, in November 2020, we will be having the first edition of a biennial conference, happening every 2 years, in Valletta. It's called MUZA.X, Shaping Museum Futures. And the conference aims to discuss and to dream about the museum of the future, what that museum will look like, what it will be like, and the rest of it. We have 3 keynote speakers who will be coming purposely for this conference. There's the call for papers open, so please, anybody interested, he, she, whoever it is more than welcome. The 3 keynote speakers are Jet Sandal, whom you probably know. She's been leading the debate on the new museum definition, with all the controversies about it. The controversies are in themselves very telling about what the museum landscape is, or what it may be, or might be, or should be. There is Mike Murawski from the US, who is Director of Learning at Portland Art Museum. He's leading an international campaign called Museums Are Not Neutral, because museums are not neutral. And there's also a very dear friend of mine, Dan Drubel, who is leading We Are Museums, and the conference happening every year in different places around Europe and elsewhere. So my invitation is to all of you to see you in Valletta in November. It's warm in November in Valletta. So that's over and above the conference. It's a good excuse to come to Malta, and I hope that my humble exchange of ideas and dreams was of interest to you, and I wish you to keep on dreaming and to inspire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that this open interview was inspired, or will be inspired to all my colleagues. And I hope that they will start to dream and make some papers for your conference, and that all of us, we will come to Malta. We will write our Ministry of Culture to send us all as a group of people who were delighted by your presentation. So thank you very much. If anyone has a question, I think that we will be ready to answer.